Okay, so continuing on with the tutorial, I'm going to switch over to do it by spaces. And I recommend it this way, as I mentioned, because this is where we're going to be heading. So if it's done, at least this part is out of the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to switch over to a plan view. And with spaces, you basically have to assign a space to each area. So if you go to the Analyze tab, when you're in the Analyze tab, you see there's space and zones, and you can click to add a space. So you can put, obviously you'll have a bunch of spaces, and this is basically a space for every room. So your mechanical rooms become a space, your bathrooms are a space, cafe is a space, each room of your inn is a space. The bathroom within like a room for the hotel, obviously there's a separate bathroom area probably with the door, that's a space. So basically anything that's enclosed becomes its own space that you would tag. And then you can, if you have a space tag load, you can, tag an actual space and it acts like a room tag. So if I go back to the settings, so you see here where I switched the manufacturing, the building type to manufacturing. But now when you tag a space and you click on its properties, you start to see, actually before I do that, before I get into that, I want to show you the actual size of a tag of a space and how to get it to match what you want. So right now I'm going to cut a section through that so I can see it. So when you click on a space, you see, you have the base level, so it's on the first floor, and it's grayed out because that's this is my first floor, but it says site. So it comes in as that level and it's grayed out. The upper limit, you can pick it to be, I want to say second floor, and I'm going to put its limit offset at 0. The base offset you can change. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the section that I created, which is right here. So I'm going to actually highlight that space, and then I'm going to go to the section. So now you see that space. So it goes right up, so it goes from the ground floor right up to the second floor. So for your limit offset, if your space only goes from, if it's only one story, maybe this limit offset becomes 2 feet now. So it's, that would be for your structure and stuff. If you have, obviously I don't have a floor there or a ceiling, but if you have a ceiling there, and if you unclick on the space shows up anyway, if you have a ceiling or a floor slab there, this should know to stop where it is. So, if you already have like a 2-foot floor slab, or if you have a ceiling located where the actual ceiling height's going to be, this should already come in room bounded by it, so you shouldn't have to set all this up. But that's a way to do it with limit offsets. And so you can see here I have this huge space, probably like 40 plus feet almost space, with no walls that I'm just going to leave open for this tutorial. And you can see here, if I pull this all the way up, see how it's room bounded by the roof? So even though I'm going past it, so even though I'm dragging this past it, keeps going on. So even though I'm dragging this past this, it knows to stop at, the roof and be room bounded by the interior elements. So that's what I was talking about with the ceiling. If you have a ceiling, it should know to stop at that ceiling or the underside of a floor slab and not go any higher. So you probably won't have to, tag it for, you'll probably won't have to set up, like a -2 offset for structure. And I'm going to do the same for this room, this space, and I'm just going to make this space so it goes up, and then go back to the plan. Okay, so now going back to what I was first mentioning before I talked about that, would you see the building type, how you can only set it as 1, as I mentioned earlier? When you click on the actual space and you start to scroll through its properties, so you get the next category, you get into the electrical lighting. You can start to calculate, you can set the work plan, and that's basically the surface of where work is going to be done, like a desk or something like that if it's an office, and that's basically where the most light you're going to want, for this is done for calculation purposes if you're going to run a lighting analysis. the reflectance of walls and ceilings and floors in the space. So obviously certain materials have more reflectancy and allow light to bounce off them and kind of help light the space than, say like a dark wall. If you had a dark wall compared to a wall painted white. Electrical loads, and you can type in electrical loads here if you wanted to. Mechanical flow, you can type in mechanical flow that you want if you want to type it in. But when you run the heat and the calculated load, which calculation and report that I will show later in the tutorial, it will fill this in for you. Required outside air, you can type in how much outside air you want, and you can see the actual, going back a second, the gray core categories of what will be calculated. So you could, if you wanted to, you could type in what you specify. So like if you do calculations or look at rules of thumbs for certain spaces, you can start to kind of know what airflow you need, and then you can run a calculation, click on the space, and you can compare, how much specified air that you actually need for the space, and then with how you have everything set up with your, system, your HVAC system, what it's actually going to be, how much outside air you need for the space to be brought in. Every space needs, fresh outside air mixed into the HVAC system. Then the next category with dimensions, you can actually start to see the dimensions of the space. So it gives you your area, it gives the perimeter of the space, the unbound height, so however how high that space is going, it'll give you the dimension. So you can see that I pulled it all the way up to the roof, so it gives you that dimension, and then it calculates the total cubic foot of the space. And that comes in handy for when, determining airflow and how much air is needed, because it's by cubic foot, so you need the cubic feet of your space. And then you can get into identity data where, the number of the space, you can give the space a name. I'm going to say this is manufacturing, and that would be kind of like the brewery part of the coffee. And then continuing down, you get to the energy analysis part, where you can say if the space is a plenum or not. You can say if it's occupable, and that just means if it's going to be used by people, or mainly the public. So if you uncheck that, that would be something for like a staircase or a mechanical room that's obviously it's not occupable 24/7 or whenever the building is occupied. It's more of like for stairs it's a means of egress, so it's not occupable. Somebody wouldn't be in there doing a task. And mechanical rooms, they're just there for mechanical rooms to hold mechanical equipment. You can select what kind of condition type it's going to be. If it's cooled, one of your main spaces are going to be just cooled because obviously it's not heated and cooled because there's no heating required in Miami because of how hot the weather is. Unconditioned would be a space like a mechanical room maybe, or a closet that doesn't really need to be conditioned. It would be more conditioned with negative pressure and vents, which we'll talk about in studio. Vented would be, as I just mentioned, if it's vented through negative pressure with other spaces, then you would say that it's vented, or if it's naturally vented. I'm going to leave this as cool. So this is where you can start to actually assign a space now to the actual room. Or I should say the space. So this is manufacturing. So I'm going to say this is a general low bay manufacturing facility. And then here you can start to say what the area per person is. So you saw the area that was here. What it'll do is it'll take this number divided by, so it'll take the area divided by this number, and then that'll give you how many people are in the space. And then that will, so here, sensible heat gain per person, if you're having 5 people in that space, it'll know that how much heat those people are giving off and how that'll affect the heat and cooling loads. Area per person can be found in the building code. It lists certain spaces and how much the required square footage there is per person. So for a factory, it'd probably be something around 500 or something like that. And then these other things you can change as well. So occupancy schedule, you can change this different times it is. You can see warehouse lighting, warehouse occupancy, school lighting, and different things that you can select. Same with lighting or power schedule, you can switch them individually. You can just hit OK. Construction type. This is what I will get into. This is if you're going to use it by the parameter function, which I will show you in a second. But you can set it up here. This is for the building in general. And then if you want to override it for a certain space, you can create your own for just that space and set certain things to it. So if you do it by in general, which I'll show you how to set up in the Analyze tab, this is for the whole building, and this is what's used. But if you set this for a certain space, this will override it for the whole building, and obviously it will be just for that space. So I showed you the people. So this is the area per person that I put in, and then with the total area, it calculated the number of people. And this is default. I can specify, the number of people that are going to be there, or I can override the area per person here if I wanted to. And the same for heat gain. This is what was specified for that space type, but I can override it here if I wanted to. But I'm going to leave everything as default. And then so that's pretty much it for that. And then again, the foot candles and lumens is more for light analysis, and how much light you need for a given task or a certain space. You can add those in, and then so you can do the same thing for this space. I'm going to do the same thing. Obviously, for you guys, you're going to have a whole bunch of spaces in your building. And then the space type, I'm going to say this is the rooms for the motel. Get where those are. I believe it's under living. So living quarters, I'm going to say motel. Obviously, for the motel or inn or whatever you want to call it, you can look through it. Obviously, there's different types. So you see here, you have a lobby for a hotel. So if you have a lobby space, that lobby would be a space. The rooms would be a space. The general areas would be spaces. So you can pick through those. So I'm going to go lobby motel. I'm going to say this is 100 square feet. Again, obviously, you want to look at the table in the building code to actually know what those numbers would be. And then again, you can set up all that information. If you want to change it, you can. I'm going to set that up. Again, you can change the construction type if you want. So that's how you set up spaces, and so you can run the analysis that way. I'm going to end this part of the video here, and when I continue with part 3, I will show you to finish in the setups, settings for the spaces, and then to actually run an analysis.